Hey guys, welcome back to the episode on the Corner Flag Talk podcast. It's your boy John, and we are not here to bring you the latest in football. This is an international break episode, and we are doing something a bit different. But before we introduce our esteemed guest, I have Brandon here with me. Brandon, what's the good, my guy?
Everything is great. I have this long and expanding grin on my face right now, and
Me too.
everybody will find out why now.
And the reason for that, guys, is that we are really graced with the presence of our guest speaker here. He is a tactics expert. He is part of the Tifo Football Podcast, which is also part of the Athletic. You can find his work there. He most recently described his job as one where he uses the word meta more often than anything else, and he has revolutionized the concept of out of possession is 9/10 of the game. Welcome to the stage, guys. We have Jon Mackenzie. John, thank you so much for joining us here today. It is really a pleasure to have you. How are you doing?
Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here, and looking forward to talking about the Premier League with you.
Yes, very much so. Brandon, you want to just ask him the quick question?
Yeah, of course. John, as we mentioned to you before, we are Trinidadians, and you've said that you know Trinidadians yourself. So, how about a greeting in our own Trini dialect to our viewers? We just wanted to say, was the scene, everybody?
Was the scene, everybody?
Yeah, there we go.
Hey!
There we go.
Well done, well done. All right, guys. So we're gonna get straight into it. So what we're doing today is that we're gonna grade each club's performance so far this season. And I briefed both guys here today. And essentially, what we're gonna do is gonna go through every team. We're gonna go in alphabetical order. We're gonna use a letter-based grading. John will lead most of the conversation, not this one, the other one. And from there, we will just kind of debate what we think about the grades, how things have gone, and taking into consideration many factors such as the investment heading into the squad, as well as losses, the difficulty of fixture, injuries, and or suspensions, and most importantly, results. And so, because it's alphabetical order, we will start with my club, which is Arsenal. And I mean, John, I because I follow your social media, I do know that you have butt heads with a few Arsenal fans in the last few weeks. Give us some of your grievances of this season. But why don't you tell us what overall grade do you have for the tabletoppers at this point in time?
So we're doing a letter grading, are we? And we're going from A to
F. Yeah.
F. Okay, don't worry. I mean,
Yeah.
as an Arsenal fan, you don't need to worry about the lower grades, of course.
Appreciate it.
But yeah, I think for Arsenal, it has to be an A grading because not only are they top of the league, not only are they comfortably top of the league, and not only did they deserve to be top of the league, but they've done so, I guess, with relative injury crisis as well. So I think off the back of that, I would be quite happy giving them an A grading.
Yeah, Brandon.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think A and A plus for the defense. I mean, the defense has been their hallmark for the season, and I still don't think anybody has found a way to breach the Arsenal defense in a consistent and reliable way. So yeah, it could be only positive things. A.
Yeah, I mean, I obviously agree as well. And I think, one of the concerns as we see them answer throughout the season was creating from open play. And I think as the season has progressed, and I don't think it's a coincidence as players like Saka and Eze started to play a lot more together, we saw like the open play XG has risen a lot. I remember going to the first international break, they were 17th in open play XG. But as of the most recent international break, they were second. Fourth. They were fourth, second overall XG. And that's a big jump and that's a big increase. And as we see players return from injury, Odegaard, one of the more notable ones, but also Kai, Madueke, and stuff like that, we should see that continue to increase. But John, I must still ask you, there's a title race going on. What concerns do you have for Arsenal for the season?
Yeah, I mean, I guess the issue that I've always had with the approach that Arsenal have had has been the sustainability and consistency of the set pieces, right? Because and I know this is a topic that people don't find that interesting, and I think Arsenal fans feel a little bit like people are jumping on that at the moment because they're good at it. But I think across the last few seasons, you can almost correlate how well Arsenal perform with how well they're finishing at set pieces, and that's a totally adequate way of playing football. It's it's within the rules of the game, and the game is set up that way, and it's impressive in many respects the way that they have been able to optimize those things. But I guess the worry that I had at the beginning of the season was like, are they going to be a team now who relies on set pieces again? And I felt a little bit like at the beginning of the season that they were trying to introduce a little bit more tactical flexibility into their approach. They were finding ways, as you say, of trying to generate open play, more open play XG. And as you say, to a certain extent, they have achieved that. But it's felt in some games as though, and I think again, a lot of this comes down to, as we said, injury and issues with particularly attacking players. The producer of the Tifo football podcast, Steve Hankey, likes to always say to me, he says, we've lost so many of our attacking players. And that is a caveat that I think is worth saying. It's felt maybe a little bit more recently that Arteta has sort of fallen back into type and gone for like a much more solid approach where you pick up the difference in goals, at least through set pieces, and it's working at the moment. I had Arsenal to win the league at the beginning of the season. I still have them to win the league now at this point, but I guess that would be my point of concern with them, whether or not that becomes an issue at any point, and if it does, whether or not they can find solutions out with that to make sure that it doesn't become a problem.
Before I let Brandon jump in here, given the platform that we have here is that all the time I would listen to your stuff but never get a chance to save back my thoughts, right? And this is giving us that opportunity. And I totally accept everything that you have said there. And for this I've also heard you say in your criticism or concern rather of set piece culture within the league, that is not necessarily that Arsenal is the one that has been bringing that forward for you, but you've seen that more with like Tottenham and some other teams, how they are extremely reliant on it. And what I have thought with the Arsenal one is that, yes, not just the injuries, but I think that one, there is an underperformance from open play for Arsenal right now, which then puts more spotlight on the set piece goals, because the less that they are finishing the open play ones, the more the set piece stand out. And as well as with the injuries, I think it's natural that if your best creators aren't in the team, then you have to find those elsewhere. And me and Brandon always say on the pod, like, the season happens in weeks of periods. Like we see Pep Guardiola only within January find his 11 and hit the gas and go forward. And I think that Arteta is trying to work through these first parts of the season while he still gets back players fit. And that can explain some of it. But I do get your general sentiment as well. Brandon, anything you add to what you said?
No, I mean, I agree with everything he said. Jon Mackenzie, you'll have to know that I've said many of the things that you've said, except John has taken it a lot better coming from you, unfortunately. But
well, to be fair, here they're from another John makes it hard.
I guess I have to, change my name, I guess. No, but I agree with everything he said. But one of the things I wanted to ask you, Mr. Mackenzie, is what do you think about Zubimendi's inclusion into this team? Because I think that he has really stood out for me for the entire season, not only in the Arsenal team, but throughout the entire league. I think that he's been so good for them coming in. And how do you think that he's improved them this season?
Yeah, I mean, I think that they have been lacking a kind of metronome, like pass tempo guy in that midfield, and I think that makes a lot of the difference. It's difficult to talk about Declan Rice because I think everyone accepts that he's a fantastic player, but he's sort of a fantastic player around the edges of what Arsenal have wanted to do a lot of the last few seasons, and it's always felt as though they've not quite got him to fit in the perfect way that in any of the iterations of the teams we've seen since he's joined. And I think just having Zubimendi there, I think having players like Calafiori and Miles Lewis-Skelly who are again guys who can be used in a certain way as well, with Rice being able to then move between any of those three as and when they're needed, just gives them a huge amount of flexibility, the ability to essentially do whatever they need to do regardless of what the opponent are doing. And I think, Zubimendi may be the sort of finishing piece in that kind of puzzle that they've had. Like you, I've been really impressed with him, Brandon. And yeah, I think it's always nice to see a player like that coming in when you get these tempo setters who are you just watch them and you see the game tick over. I think you can make the same point about Nico Gonzalez this season, doing the same kind of thing for Man City. And I think this is the reason why I think Rodri has been one of the greatest players in the world over the last few seasons, because he combines he combines that tempo setting, small space stuff, the ability to just constantly make the right decision with the ability to cover those large spaces as well. So yeah, it's been a pleasure to watch Zubimendi.
Yeah, great. All right, guys, let's move on to Aston Villa now. So yeah, John, why don't you tell us what you think about Aston Villa's season so far?
Ooh. So
And
I've got to give a grade. Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you know what? I want to sort of grade them quite low because I think that they started the season absolutely abysmally. They were terrible at the beginning of the season, and then they've had this sort of turnaround in form. And there definitely has been a turnaround in form, but even despite that, I think they've run a little bit rich from where the results have got them. So I think they were very bad, and they're now sort of mediocre. And I'm kind of interested to see where they're going to end up this season. There's obviously all kinds of reasons and caveats for why that's happened. But in terms of grading, I think I'm going to go C, and we'll go C positive, C plus, because I guess they have got to a good position in the table now, and so all that remains for them to do now is to continue their upward trajectory and make sure they continue in that direction. But I think they're not out of the woods yet. There's still a lot more that I want to see from them. I think the worry I've had with Villa is that it seems as though they haven't really evolved in any sort of way from a technical or a tactical point of view. And then on top of that, you have the fact that their squad, I think, was quite patchy, has been quite patchy, and they've struggled to get any kind of pace into their team, which has meant that they've looked pretty toothless at times in an attacking sense. So I think they're not out of the woods yet. They've obviously turned around their early form, but I think they've had a few results that have kind of flattered them. They've come out just on the right side of maybe closer 4 games or even XG'd their opponents. And I want to see a little bit more from them before I start saying, oh, everything's fixed for Villa.
Yeah. Before I let Brandon answer, could you just tell us what was the expectation for them when they started the season? To finish around where?
Yeah, I mean, it's a tricky one, right? Because whenever we've talked about this, I've talked a lot in the last few seasons about Villa and Newcastle as a sort of double entity of teams who you expect to see sort of breaking into that big 6, right? You think the big 6 becomes a big 8, but you recognise that it's very hard for them to do given the financial restrictions that are around them. So we've seen that both from Newcastle and Villa, is that they've had good seasons, they've got into the Champions League, they've then struggled with the sort of fixture snarl up that you get in the Champions League, on top of the fact that all of your players want to play in the Champions League. They haven't been able to sort of match the squad to that, and as a result of the financial situation they're in, they can't spend big money to make their squad fit, right? So both of these teams feel like they're in sort of like an oscillation between a good season and a bad season, and it feels almost as though Villa have potentially got to the end of that cycle where they've not actually been able to improve their squad at the rate that they need to in order to fit the place in the table. So yeah, I definitely had Villa and Newcastle much higher in the table than they both are, and I think there's definitely worrying signs for the two teams. I would have them in that sort of, you got the top 4 who are going to, I think, just not going to change position too much. And then I had Spurs, Manchester United, Villa and Newcastle, and it's looking like both Villa and Newcastle could finish a little bit below them and have teams above them. So yeah, that was my expectation for where they would be.
Yeah, Brandon, Villa.
Yeah, I agree with the C grade. I feel like there are a lot of players that a lot of people like from the Villa team that just haven't been performing this season. I feel like Ollie Watkins is a prime example. I think everybody's just waiting for him to start scoring goals, and that when question just keeps going and going. And as John said, I don't think there's a lot of evolution tactically from the team, and I don't know how that's gonna affect them for the rest of the season, because I've seen a few talks about them going into the market and stuff. So they might be a bit short. Tielemans is on his way back, so we'll have to see how that also impacts them going forward. But I think C is a fair grade, given that they were so bad and they kind of turned it around a bit.
Yeah, full agreement in everything you all said. I think Tielemans has been a huge miss for them at the start of the season, because they really struggle with central progression from deep as the season started, and the lack of pace that you both mentioned has come before, which to me made their window even more questionable when we see some of the players that they brought in. Like, I think Gesson is a kind of pacey player, but Sancho isn't that type of player. There wasn't any real priority to add that pace either, and they don't use the wing backs that have pace when they set out the starting level, right? Digne consistently starts over Maatsen. So it's one for Emery to answer. Cool. Next up, close to your heart, John, we have Bournemouth. So, what color of E would you like to give them?
Yeah, I guess I do have to give them A. I don't know. I'm always very pessimistic with Bournemouth. I always have them low in my season predictions, and they always find a way to confound me. Yeah, let's say A minus, maybe B plus between those two.
Come on. I think the Villa result is coloring the answer, which is fair because I think the Villa one was kind of bad, but the scoreline was bad, but it has been a really strong start to the season for them.
Yeah, it's funny because like the Villa game is not the sort of game that really concerns me. It's I think Bournemouth have these results in them, and in the second half of that game, they went down 2-0 to a set piece from outside the box, a direct free kick, and then a sort of Onana pinger from distance. Villa were definitely the better team in the first half, but they weren't 2-0 better. And then in the second half, Bournemouth came out, and I thought we're putting Villa under a huge amount of pressure. They win the penalty, and then Semenyo misses that penalty. And I think from that point onwards, the Bournemouth team were very much like heads drop. This is just not going to be our. It's not going to be our day. And then they concede another couple. One which is a set piece corner, and Ollie Barkley heads it on. He's sort of like a back post flick. So I don't think he's even trying to score. I think he's just trying to get the ball into a dangerous area and it goes in. And then there was a finish off Daniel Marlon that was just like a deflection when someone else had a shot. So it's one of those ones where people look at it and are like, yeah, great game for Villa. They're definitely coming back into things now. But I think on the face of it, I was just kind of like just one of those games where everything has gone wrong for one team, everything's gone right for the other, and it's hard to really read too much into it. But there have been some other, I guess, concerning games from Bournemouth. Their XG at the beginning of the season was great, and it's tailed off a little bit as time has gone on. And I guess the concern, it's funny because the concerns I had going into the season were Bournemouth lost pretty much their entire back line, and had to rebuild from scratch almost there. And there was players missing for injury who'd been big for them in the season last season. So Lewis Cook coming back from a long-term injury, Ryan Christie coming back from injury, Kluivert had an injury over the summer, and that was their starting midfielder, the preferable midfield for most of the season, albeit with Lewis Cook starting at right back and Tyler Adams coming in for him. So there was that concern that I had that. Well, it's funny because I've got a document on my computer at the beginning of the season. I write down all of the things I think could happen to teams, and I write basically a question for each one as a sort of practice for getting into the habit of thinking of topics for content. And one of the ones I've got down for Bournemouth is, could Bournemouth lose all their players and get even better? Which at the time I was like, this is ridiculous. Even by my standards, this is ridiculous. But I actually feel as though we've seen some of that coming through, because I think Bournemouth have been able to introduce a lot more control into their games, which was the thing that I was worried about in previous seasons, where they would get into winning game states by creating these chaotic moments and destabilizing opponents and stopping them from being able to be comfortable, which is what a lot of particularly elite sides want to do, which is why I think Bournemouth have a good record against some of the better sides.
Yeah.
When they get into those winning game states, though, you then want to have control, right? Because you don't want games to be chaotic, because then it works against your favor. So, and I think what they've been able to do this season is actually introduce that control element into their games a little bit more. But I think it has come at a cost of maybe being as dangerous as they were going forward. And yeah, I mean, it's funny. I think that they're around about where I think they should be in the table. I think they'll continue this season around that kind of level, as long as they don't have too many injuries. But yeah, I'm always a little bit pessimistic, because I think they do have this tendency to finish like quite poorly, despite the good numbers that they'll put up, and they just have a tendency as well to drop points in games where they should really be winning. So particularly against teams in the bottom half.
Before I let Brandon come in, are you worried about the Brighton cycle could be happening to Bournemouth, and that they do get Brighton gets in the habit of moving on players, bringing new ones, they do really well, but they never actually move up the table that much. And I think since Iraola has come in, you'll have really threatened to enter those European spots. Are you worried that you could be entering that cycle as a club of kind of ended up being stuck around that 8 to 10 place spot?
Yeah, I think so, especially because they will be a selling club, right? If the correct offers come in, they'll happily move them on. I mean, they kept Semenyo on, but I think they had the financial weight to do that, because they'd made such a huge amount of money on the other players that they'd moved on, right? So but yeah, when the right offers come in for the right players, they will move them on for sure. And then you're only as good as your recruitment, right? And despite the fact that their recruitment has been very good in recent seasons, there's always a risk involved when you're taking players out and moving them in. Semenyo is a player who is like a game changer for a club like Bournemouth, and I think you lose someone like him, and okay, maybe you bring in someone who is a good level player for what they need, but and Semenyo is sort of, I find him quite hit and miss. I think there's some games where he's just unplayable. There's other games where he's very quiet. I think that's much more valuable for a club like Bournemouth, where you just want a game changer to sort of pull you back into games or win you games. We've seen him doing that a few times this season. The game against Fulham, where Bournemouth looked dead and buried, and then Semenyo basically pulled them back into that and got them all 3 points. So I think that you losing someone like that is massive for a club like Bournemouth. So yeah, those are the sorts of things that I worry about. But at the same time, it's kind of like, what else can they do, right? This is what we're talking about with Villa and Newcastle. It's the cycle you end up going on, and for clubs of this stature, what you have to do is perform well, sell your players well, and recruit well. And yeah, it can all come crashing down with a poor summer window, but so far Bournemouth have done a good job of like bringing in new players, getting them to fit the Iraola system. Iraola himself has evolved, so I think in the long run they will be fine. But yeah, there's always that sense of precarity in these teams, and that's just the reality of modern Premier League football, I think.
Yeah, Brandon.
I don't have anything to add. I just want to know who's been your most surprising player for Bournemouth this season, John? Like, I mean, outside of Semenyo, I think Semenyo surprised everyone. But who you think have stood out really?
Could the other John answer first? Because I also don't have to take my answer. But I wanted to say Alex Scott, because I know that he was signed last season, but I think he's been fantastic this year, and he really did earn that England call up. Because earlier we talked about both control for Bournemouth and central progression that Villa had a problem with. That's two things that I think he's contributed a big bunch to. And you talk about losing players, right? He, I think, really helped for when Christie wasn't available, and even when he was available, to be a good competition for him.
Yeah, I think that's right. And it's really interesting. At the beginning of the season, Scott was being played in the 10 slot, which seems like the obvious thing to do with him. But actually, it was only once Iraola flipped him with Marcus Tavernier and started playing Scott deeper and Tavernier higher that we started seeing the best of both of them, I think. And the same thing happened last season as well with Christie. Like, Christie was originally being played in the 10 spot and then was moved deeper. So it's a really tricky conversation, I think, this one, because the Iraola system is so unique to the Premier League that the some of the players who stand out, I think, can sometimes it's easy to sort of extrapolate from that those players are great regardless of the system. But then we've seen, for example, players like Milos Kerkez leave that system, go to Liverpool and have a pretty torrid time of it. And so I personally find it kind of tricky to really read the levels of the players that are there and think, like, what will this player look like outside of this system? But in terms of the other players who've impressed me, I think David Brooks at the beginning of the season, again, he was a player who was only playing there because Marcus Tavernier was playing centrally. He was only playing there because Justin Kluivert was injured, and he had a fantastic beginning of the season. Part of the reason why I think Bournemouth are so high up the table is because David Brooks was so good at the beginning of the season, but he's playing a little bit less now that he's not around. Evan Nielsen is a player who just, I find, wildly underrated by Premier League fans. I think he has a really thankless task in that team, but just I think of the players who are there, Semenyo notwithstanding, he is the guy who, for me, represents the highest technical level in that squad. Like, that guy is a guy who could comfortably play in Champions League teams with the level of technicality that he has. And I think he sometimes goes under the radar because he has to do, a very physical job as well as using the technicality that he has. So he's always impressed me since he's been at Bournemouth. And then, maybe one final mention just for Alex Jimenez, who's been brought in on loan from Milan. In the whole time that Iraola's been there, they've struggled really to replace Adam Smith, the right back, who is a player who, like, I have a bizarre love for, given the fact that he, this is a guy who clearly, like, is about to retire, and they've been trying to replace year on year. They played Lewis Cook there for a while last season as well when Smith was injured. And then again, this season, Smith has been, in and out. Cook's played there a little bit, but they brought in Alex Jimenez, who he's not had a fantastic start, I would say, to life at Bournemouth, but every week he is improving. And I think it's one of those things where you look at it and think, oh, they finally got a decent right back option now. And I think, for the couple of seasons where Iraola has already been here, they've never really had that kind of flying right back option. And so it's exciting to see what that will produce now, with Truffert obviously on the other side being hugely impressive and adding a level of that control that we talked about before too.
Yeah. Cool. All right, guys. We don't want to keep John here whole evening, so let me pick up the pace a little bit. Brentford next. What do you have for them?
Yeah, I think Brentford have to be. I don't know. I think it's tough when it comes to grading. I guess you grade them within the possibilities of what they could have achieved, and so as a result of that, I think you can arguably say that Brentford deserve like an A grading on the basis of. I mean, I expected them to be in a relegation battle, and it seems very much as though they're not. So I'm feeling pretty positive about them. Again, I'm not sure how sustainable their approach is, but they've done enough to be well clear of the relegation battle, and I think that's all you can really do as a team like Brentford. I expect that they will be good enough now to keep clear of the dreaded line in the table. But they've lost their manager, they've lost a lot of good players, and yet they're still doing the things that Brentford do, which is find the margins, play smart football for their level, and with the reality of what they have to achieve.
Yeah. Anything to add, right, Brandon?
Well, I mean, based on everything I've heard about the Premier League this season, everybody seems to want to play like Brentford. So I guess we have to give them an A grade for that, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. Next up we have Brighton. What do you have for Brighton, John?
Well, yeah, it's a tricky one. I've never really fully understood what it is that Fabian Herzler is trying to do with this iteration of Brighton.
And if you're saying that, imagine how we feeling.
Yeah. So I think I'll say C+ for them. I don't know. There's been some games where they've had good results, but there's been more games, I think, where they've been in winning game states and ended up dropping points. I think defensively at times they've looked a little bit open. I think they're a very exciting team to watch going forward. I think they've got an incredibly exciting squad. But there's never really felt that sense of coherence that I expect a Brighton team to have. So yeah, that's why I'm giving them a C+.
Yeah. I was gonna go more C-, and
Okay.
I shouldn't punish a team for doing exactly what I expect them to do, because they are mid-table, they are 11th. And I did have them there at the start of the season, but again, we talked about this before, where they were a club that felt like they were threatening to punch above their weight a little bit more, and it does just kind of feel like they continue to go on that line. And I'm not writing off the players that they have, but I do think that they are going through just a bit in that cycle where the magic isn't there with all their recruitment. Like we went through that period where every single player they recruit, it would have worked out, and it worked out at a high level. Whereas now, I don't think the magic is all the way there with all their players to really dazzle the league, and really threaten to go higher above, like we are seeing with so many teams here. So yeah, I went more close. I'll still see what C-.
Oh,
Brandon?
well, I went D because I just think that everything I've seen from Brighton so far tells me that they're trending in the wrong direction. And I think a lot of their performances this season have been bailed out by individual performances. And as John said, it's very difficult to understand what you see from Hutzela a lot of the time. But I mean, I don't think they're like relegation in trouble or anything like that. But it's just I don't feel like they're going in the right direction. So I think D would have been my grade.
Yeah, cool. All right, next up, we have Burnley. A more interesting one. We have for Burnley, John.
I mean, it's hard to say, really. I mean, the good thing about Burnley is that they are out of the relegation zone right now. The bad news for them is that the underlying numbers have them easily the worst team in the league. So, yeah, I guess on the basis of that, I'll probably give them a D rather than an F. But yeah, it's not looking good for them, I think, in the long run.
Yeah, Brandon?
Yeah, it's when all the cards are stacked against you, sometimes it's difficult to grade them based on other teams. But I agree with the D. I think that's fair. It's not too harsh on them as well, because they can do better. They have had players that have been performing well in specific games. So maybe at some point they could get it right. But as for now, I'm cool with the D.
Well, I have C,
Ooh,
and
okay.
just reason off of, I think, one, their fixture list. Look, for any promoted team, your fixture list is hard, but they've already gotten Arsenal, City, and Liverpool out the way from some of their fixtures, and to be out the relegation zone, even given that. Now, I think what would have stopped me from trying to put it a bit higher was losing to West Ham, because I do think not that they had to win, but I do think if you want to stay up, those are the games that you can't let your relegation rivals take 3 points off you. And I think that one is a bit of a concern. But they are doing way better than I expected, because I thought they would have been, I honestly thought they'd have been bottom at this point, going into at this point in the season, and still being outside the relegation zone has me a bit impressed. A few players have impressed me. Hartman has really impressed me. And I've also respected Scott Parker's, I think, willingness to improve as a coach. And I think that every tenure that I've seen him take on, I see him try to add more things. And I think he's tried to make them a lot more defensively solid than the last time when he was Bournemouth coach. And I don't think it worked out as well for him then. And so, all those things considered, I was willing to go see. But I can see that I'm the outlier here. So I will just leave it at that. Brandon, I'm going to start with you for this one because it's your team. So, Chelsea, bro, what it is that you have for Chelsea for this season?
Okay, well, I'm gonna start. I think I'm gonna give it a B. Because I think that at the start of the season, I don't think people had us as high as we are currently. I think people thought the defense was going to be a huge issue throughout the entire season. I think losing Caldwell is a big miss. Cole Palmer being out for an extended period of the season, we've lost the lap. And despite all these suspensions and red cards that we've been getting throughout the entire season, I think Maresca has really found a way to keep us afloat, for lack of a better phrase. And I'm really satisfied with what he's done so far, because with all the things that he's had on his plate, I think he's done really well. He's incorporated Estevao into the team very slowly, which I think is only going to be good for him for the rest of the season. I think some of the players that we've had underperforming, they like at the end, like in the most recent game, you could see the performance has gone up a bit. And I can't give it an A, because if it was an A, we'd probably be closer to Arsenal. But I think B is fair based on everything that I've seen, and based on my own expectations as well. I think I thought we would have won a few more games, maybe 2 or maybe 3 more games. But I can't be too upset about it. And I think B might be a little fair. I'm interested to hear what John has to say about it, though.
Yeah, I mean, I think B's a fair shout. It would probably be closer to A had it not been the fact that you still seem inconsistent, which has been my criticism of Chelsea under Maresca the whole time, which is, you're dropping points to teams who you really shouldn't be dropping points to, losing to a team like Sunderland at home, for example, which was only a couple of weeks ago, right? I was at Stamford Bridge at the weekend, actually, and I thought it was a fantastic performance from Alejandro Garnacho. Estevao came on and looked, I mean, he always has looked fabulous. Feels as though that team is a lot more in the image of Maresca than it was maybe last season. And there are obviously other difficulties in that you now have to work with a Champions League schedule rather than a Conference League schedule, which made your life a lot easier because you could basically run 2 consecutive squads. And this time round, I think the task of squad management is much more difficult. And I think, again, Maresca's been up to the task of it. So yeah, there's still questions I have about what Maresca's Chelsea will look like, but like you say, they're in the top 4 comfortably. It's hard to have any sort of gripe with that. I think his coaching style, well, I mean, the playing style of the team that he has doesn't suit everybody, especially the fans. It was interesting being in Stamford Bridge and hearing the fans getting frustrated about certain things. But this has been something that's been there throughout Maresca's coaching career, right? That the fans can get quite frustrated with games when they don't win. When they win, they're like, "Oh, maybe it's not as bad as we thought." But I think that's the thing I'm kind of interested in to see with Maresca. It's the fact that teams have realised we can mid block against them and make it hard for them to progress the ball and generate chances. But again, like injuries, we're saying injuries about all of the top teams, but injuries to strikers for Chelsea seems to have been a real issue. To the extent that we saw Mark Guiu playing up front for a bit. We saw Pedro Neto playing as a false nine for a little. Well, he was playing as a striker, but not a striker that you wouldn't expect to be a striker. And that's the reality. Is that I think that Maresca needs very specific profiles of players for his system to work, and hasn't always had the availability for those. So, yeah, I think that I have Chelsea as 4th place in the Premier League in my predictions. I think they will be 4th place by the end of the season, thereabouts. I think they're the fourth best team in the league, and I'm happy with the B on that basis. I think an A for me would have been for them to overperform my expectations of 4th place, and I don't think they're doing that right now.
I don't have much.
Can I ask a question, John?
Yeah.
John, I want to ask you. A lot of the metrics that you look at and statistics and graphs and everything. One thing that's interesting about all of those things is that you see Caicedo and Enzo on like either end of the spectrum on most of those statistics. How do you think Maresca has incorporated the both of them to play together? And do you think like he's doing it in a good way? And do you think it's a sustainable way for Chelsea to play?
I absolutely love Caicedo. I think he's just a fantastic player, potentially still underrated by Premier League fans. So, yeah, I think the way that he fits in many respects, he carries that system anyway. He does the big space defending. He does a lot of the build-up stuff. He has the ability to do the progressive passing, the progressive carrying, and he pops up with goals, and they're usually beautiful goals, right? Enzo Fernandez is an interesting one because he's a very sort of flexible player for Maresca. I think the game against Wolves, what we saw there was him dropping out into the wider areas because they had to try and break down a often quite stolid low block, and he was him and Cucurella were sort of rotating, trying to pull out the centre back on that side to create space for Garnacho, and they eventually created a couple of chances through there. But you've also seen Fernandez sort of play. I mean, he's played on both sides. He's played deeper in build-up. He's played more advanced. He's been a box crasher and scores incredible goals, I think, arriving dynamically into the box. So, yeah, I think I love the way that they are both used. I think with Caicedo being sort of the solid linchpin, you know exactly what you're going to get from him. He plays the same role pretty much the whole time. But then with Enzo Fernandez just having that flexibility to sort of be almost like a tactical cheat code for Maresca to have him perform as and when he in the way that he wants to use to break down the opponent. So I've been pretty impressed with both of those players, to be honest.
Just today, John, we put in this out on Monday, so it'll be a good while after, but you put out a piece about Garnacho and being possibly one of the signs of the season, right? And I just wanted to, if we could get to elaborate on it a bit more. Obviously, his numbers aren't that high, but you've been really impressed with him. So if we could just expand on that.
Yeah, it's so that with that, I mean that piece of content has pissed a lot of people off. Mainly I think because he's Manchester. Yeah, exactly. Because I think there's a sense with them that he was a troublesome player, and they were glad that he left. I've always really liked Garnacho from a playing point of view, because I think he's one of the film Moneyball and the baseball film where they bring in these players that are maybe slightly undervalued by the market, and they're in that scouting meeting and Brad Pitt's there and he's saying, why is it that we're signing this player? Why are we interested in this player? And Jonah, what's his name, that further down the table says, because he gets on base. For me, Garnacho is that player, right? Garnacho is a player who gets on base. He gets in the box. He puts up productive numbers. So I started that video off by saying, look, if you look at look at this guy in terms of purely expected numbers, his expected goals and his expected assists, he's right up there. He's like 0.8 xG plus XA per 90 for the Premier League. That puts him behind two players. One is Erling Haaland, who puts up like an XG a game at the moment. So that's just cheat code style. So it's almost not human. The other one is actually Stevão, who again, like is, you've seen him coming on as a sub and changing games in that way. What's interesting about Garnacho, who's in the third place there, is that he's not been really coming on in substitute situations in the Premier League. He's actually been starting games. So I think he's played 6 games, but started 5 of them. And as a result, I think that his numbers that represents for me sort of the indication that if he gets more minutes, he should be pretty comfortable putting up similar kinds of numbers. And the reason why I think he's so interesting is not because I think that if in a technical sense or anything like that he's a standout player. It's that he is a system player. He does exactly what Maresca wants him to do in the position that he's in, and the system is designed to get him into those scenarios as frequently, sustainably as possible, and make those situations as dangerous as possible for him as well. So the Wolves game is a great example of that. I thought it was a really great game from him. If you watch through all of his actions in the game, he just does everything pretty much right, like neat and tidy, recycles the ball when he needs to recycle it, gets in behind when he needs to get in behind. He has a couple of times where he goes past his player, a few times where he doesn't quite manage it, but he just does the correct thing. And that's why I think he's going to be so important for this Chelsea side, because I think on the one side, if you can get Steavam in as much as possible, that's your sort of standout technical, like, difference maker player who can just do something from nowhere. With Garnacho, what you get is the opposite. It's just like metronomic, bang, bang, bang. He's always going to do the things that make the right decisions and make the situations as dangerous as possible. He won't always look as flashy as a Steavam, but if he continues producing at the rate that he is, I think quietly he'll have to be in the conversations about the signings of the season, just because that's the kind of player that Chelsea need. They got him relatively cheap. He was arguably Manchester United's best player under Eric Ten Hag in his first season. All those things were why I wanted to make that video, just to have people have him on their radar a little bit more, I think.
Yeah. The last thing on Chelsea, and then we move on, is that I think, for me personally, I have B, but my B is actually really high. And the reason for that is, like, I went to this season thinking that I had them fifth, but fifth being Champions League spot still. And it's because I think outside of Palmer, and I did think João Pedro would have had a good season, I saw a lack of goals from the entire team, plus all the concerns about defense, right? But the reason that I think my B is really high is because I've actually been very much impressed with the amount of adversity that they've pushed through to get these results. We talk about the talisman, and probably the best player in the team has barely played any minutes this season. You're talking about Caicedo stepping up the way he did, all the red cards is overcome, and the players that have stepped out as well. And I think the player that the most that I'm happy with, I know we spoke about Caicedo, and I'm not taking away anything from that, it's actually Reece James and how he's come back into this position of making a case for being the best right back in the league. And I think he's been the best right back in the league. We're in a position where he's fit every game, and it's expected that he plays every game and plays at a ridiculously high level. And so I've been really impressed, actually, with everything that they've pushed through to get to this point. I do agree that I think he's been managing Esteban really well. And I, like every other neutral, enjoy seeing a player like that and would like to see him more. But we also have to be conscious it's an 18-year-old coming straight from Brazil. And just the one question I want to ask you, John, before we move on, is I've long had the theory that in a best case scenario, Enzo and Palmer don't actually both play their best together. And we now spoke about some of Enzo's best traits, but I think some of those are stuff that Palmer likes to do as well. And I think that in an ideal world, Chelsea fans would like to have Palmer in the 10 and Enzo and Caicedo behind him. But I think, for me, what ends up happening in a midfield like that is Enzo feels a bit redundant, in the sense that you have Caicedo, who wants to be ball dominant in the first and the second thirds of the pitch, but then when you reach the final third, it's Palmer you're looking for and all these things. And I think that some of Enzo's passing quality gets lost in there, because there's two players who have been very ball dominant, and then you also have Palmer, who wants to be on the final third player as well. And so you can tell me if you think there's any sense of that argument, or was it also?
Yeah, I think the phrase that I keep saying these days is just tactical diversity. And I think that the reality is, for teams like this, they can't have this is the way that we want to play if we have all of our players available. The reality is always you're going to have some kind of combination of those kind of players. So there's some games where we've already mentioned it, like with Enzo, you want to almost have him as a box crasher because he is such a good arriver in the ball. But there's other games where you want him, have him deeper in the field and have him helping out with ball progression against certain opponents. There's some games where, like you say, maybe you don't want Enzo at all in that team, and you can use someone like Reece James inverting from fullback to get all of the build-up stuff that you need, and then you can afford to have Cole Palmer and someone else maybe higher up the pitch. So
Yeah.
I think I don't think there's sort of like a magical answer for this really, so much as it's great to have the availability of those
options.
players.
Yeah.
So maybe that's a cop-out answer, but I think that's
fine,
the reality of the modern game, right? Is that in some games you're going to want to play more direct, and then you maybe want Enzo's passing from deeper. In other games, you're going to be breaking down a mid/low block, in which case you might want a slightly different kind of player on the field instead of him.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. Next team. We can try and blitz through these next few. We have Crystal Palace up next. What do you have for Crystal Palace, John?
Yeah, I think we probably have to give Crystal Palace an A. I don't know if you guys would disagree with that, but following on from their good end of last season that they had, they're carrying on that form, and Glasnow's got them playing really well. I think what's so interesting about Palace is that they play like 40% possession games. This is the team that's designed to not have the ball, and yet they've managed to do it in such a way that means that they don't often feel like they are a team who have that little of the ball, but they also have ways of keeping opponents away from their goals so that they're not just sitting in a low block. They have like a really nice active mid block, which then becomes a really nice way of generating chances when they turn the ball over as well. They have the ability to jump up high or drop in deep when they need. But I think for me, what I love about them most is their mid block and the players that they have, who sort of just so well coached by Glasner in knowing how to generate chances in the system that they have and stop opponents having chances in the other direction.
Yeah, not much to add to that. Headed into the last international break, a week removed from when they beat Liverpool, one of the things that I thought was really interesting that you all mentioned, the Tifo, was they actually were performing very much in line with the underlying numbers. So usually at this point last season, it was Forest in a similar case, but Forest was overperforming, whereas Palace were performing very much in line with what was expected of them. But a lot of players have stepped up. I think Sarr is one of them, and a big shout out to Jeremy, who stepped up in Eze's absence as well. So yeah, I have no questions. I think Palace have given us our hardest game for this season, in the way that they really do deny you space. And yeah, Brandon.
No, I don't have anything to add. I think A is very fine. They have I think the third best. Is it the second best defense? Third best defense?
Yes.
In the league.
Joints third, I think. But yeah, the three all game at Bournemouth kind of skew it a little bit.
Yeah. But I want to add something to what John said. Like they have 40% possession for the season, but it every single game feels like a free flowing game. To be honest, you wouldn't be able to tell that they had so little possession based on when you watch a lot of their games. So yeah, I think A is very fair, very entertaining team, probably the most entertaining team in the league, probably.
Staying with you, Brandon, what you would have had for Everton?
Oh, that's interesting. I guess a B. I want to give it a B. I think people had a lot of people thought Everton were gonna go down this season. I think I know a lot of people had a lot of worries about them, but I think some of the recruitment that they've had, I think that those players have performed really well. When you watch a lot of their games, you could watch they're actually giving it a go, and they're not sitting back a lot of the time. I also feel like it's not a classic Moyes team. I don't know if that's the games that I've watched, but I'll give them a B. I don't know if you all feel differently about that.
Yeah, John?
Yeah, it's funny. I guess they seem like quite an inconsistent side to me. There's some games where they just seem to ease their way through to a win, and then there's other games. I mean, I watched the game they had against Sunderland, and in the second half, it was one of the worst performances I'd seen in the Premier League this season. And it's sort of hard to know how to read that. I mean, I think with Moyes, what you get is a sort of like one size fits all approach, and I think when it works, and when it doesn't, it looks pretty miserable. And for a team like Everton, that's fine because they will pick up enough wins to stay in the league. But it also, I think it also makes them quite like a high variable team. So I think if you look at his West Ham seasons, there'll be some seasons where they like overperformed because the variancing was so high. And they finished quite high up the table. They got European football and they won the Conference League that season. But then the following season, when they were in the Conference League, they were for a long time like just hovering above the relegation zone and looked absolutely useless. And I don't think that much changed there beyond that. Some games went well for them more often than they in the first season than in the second, where a few games went a little bit less good. Obviously, they had Europe as well, which had an impact. But I think that's the reality of what you get with Moyes, and it will be they'll lose a couple of games and everyone will say, oh, are they going to be in trouble? And then they'll win the next 2 games and everyone will be like, oh, they'll be fine. That'll be the reality of their season.
Yeah. I went C, and I was actually hovering over D, and it's because I had them as my surprise team going into the season. And funny enough, since they beat Wolves 2-3 in August, they went on a run of 1 win in 8 until they defeated Fulham in the most recent weekend. And I do think that they've had signings that did perform well. Grealish, one of them. Keenan Drisby Hall has been really good as well. But I don't think all have had the impact that they've wanted. So I think Barry and Dibbling hasn't had much say into the season as yet. As well as Moyes' team is characteristically very good at being stodgy in defense. I think they've actually given up a lot of kind of silly moments at times. Now, again, I know like Branthwaite isn't there, but I still expected performance so I to be better. Even though it's only 13th, it's not bad. But I still think I expected a bit more from them. Cool. Next up, we have Fulham. I could go first for one, and yeah, this is like a D for me. And the thing is, we spoke about staleness with Villa before, and I do think that there is a sentiment to this as well. And funny enough, Marco Silva is actually a coach that I really like, and I think for good reason, Frank Iraola have always spoken about really highly Glasner as well. And I think Marco Silva is one to me that actually kind of slips under the radar a lot of managers that are actually punching above their weight given their resources and the squads that they've had. But this season, it really feels like it has gone off the boil. We're talking about another team that I think lacks pace in the attack, and another team that, similar to Villa, actually is dependent on a striker that's past his prime in trying to get a lot more juice out of him. And so I like the squad. Not just because half the squad came through Arsenal, but I do expect more than to be in a relegation battle, because that is where they are right now. So yeah, D for me. John?
Yeah, I think I would agree with that with the D. It's again, like you say, Silva has overperformed with them, it seems, for a number of seasons, given the resources available to him. But it does feel this season as though like the resources are starting to match the performances a little bit, and I think they'll be in a relegation battle. I don't think they will ever really flirt with the relegation zone, but I think that's because there's going to be teams who are worse than them, and that's the reality.
Yeah, Brandon?
Yeah, I think D is fair. I don't have anything to add. I love a lot of those Fulham players, but I'm really sad to see a lot of them underperforming this season.
Yeah. Next up, we have Leeds United. Brandon, go ahead now. Who you have for Leeds?
Well, they are 16th. They have 11 points. I'm not sure if that's a good thing or a bad thing, but I'm gonna be fair. I'm gonna give them a B because they won 3 games, and I think that's a lot given how them coming back into the Premier League, based on the quality we've seen throughout the entire league. I think this is a good start for them and a good way that they could propel themselves to try and stay in the league. It's a good foundation to build on. So I'd like to give them a B. I don't want to be too harsh on them.
Yeah. John, I'll let you go last this time, but I had B as well, and I did flirt with A because I do think that when you watch their underline, they are actually underperforming a lot. Like, they've actually played really, really well. They've had one of the best presses in the league as well. And like, for example, the Leeds versus Tottenham game, bro, like they were all over Spurs and unfortunately came out with no points. But I think they've surprised me more than anybody so far this season because of how competitive they have been. I mean, kudos to the 3 promoted sides. Obviously, we'll talk about Sunderland a little later. But yeah, I think B as well. Big up the midfield that they have there. I think all of them have contributed at different points. Starch, Longstaff, even Aronson, who going into the season, honestly forgot he was still there. But yeah, so B for me. John?
I'm actually a Leeds United fan, so yeah, I don't know how many people know that, but
thank God we were nice. Thank God we were nice.
Yeah, I mean, look, you're going to be nicer than I was probably. I agree with you being towards the high end of the spectrum for Leeds so far. I think the worry for Leeds fans is that I think we feel as though we have a squad that it could stay up this season, but it's very much dependent on the way that Daniel Farke uses it, and I think he has a tendency. It's funny because I think he's managed some games, as you say, really well. There's been a lot of people who've watched the games and been quite impressed with them, But there's other games where he's sort of implemented a sort of weirdly questionable approach to games, and it's meant that Leeds haven't been able to just stay in the game and compete. I think they're very dependent on building in the wide areas, and so I think opponents are starting to find if you can disconnect the fullbacks from the first line of build up, then Leeds really struggle to generate ball progression, especially when you look at that midfield that has, you mentioned it, Anton Stack, Ethan Ampadu, Sean Longstaff. That is a midfield that is not built for ball progression. It's a team that's built for winning second balls. And I think the frustration that many of us Leeds fans have is that actually we feel as though that squad is actually built for long ball football. We've got Dominic Calvert-Lewin as one of the best hold-up strikers in the league, in my opinion. And yet, rather than trying to just go long, destabilize opponents, win second balls, and then generate chances from there, we're just consistently trying to progress the ball through the wide areas. And in some games it's working, in other games it isn't. So, yeah, I think for me, I'm happy with a B. We've got a really, really grim run coming up.
Yeah.
I think
yeah.
At the end of that run, I think I'll be surprised if Daniel Farker is still the coach. Then the question is, what's going to happen then?
I wanted to ask, given like we've always seen Daniel Farker before in this league, and he has not left a good impression. Have you seen anything from him tactically that you felt makes him more adept to where the league is now than his previous stints?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny, right? Because I feel as though he coaches good mid-block. And yet he doesn't always have Leeds playing in a mid block. Sometimes he has us playing in a high press, which I think is quite porous. And again, like I said before, I think in some games we would cause teams way more problems if we were just like, fine, we're not going to be able to progress the ball in the way that he might want to. But if we go long, we look for second balls, and we essentially become a counter press, counter attack side, then we would be much more dangerous. And the question is not whether or not we can do it. The question is whether or not we will do it on the basis of what he has us set up to do. So, yeah, I think it's quite a frustrating one for Leeds fans. But yeah, hopefully we have enough juice in us to just about stay up. But yeah, I think this next run is going to be pretty brutal.
But what is with John? I would love for us to have the three promoted side stay up. Just given, I don't think it's possible. I really don't think it's realistic. But I think given how the last 2 years have gone, where it just felt like teams came up and went back down, it would be such a breath of fresh air. Because I think what tends to happen is that when teams feel like the promoted teams don't actually threaten them, we can end up in situations like we're going to talk about Wolves in a little bit, where they don't feel like they need to reinvest into their squads, and they don't feel like they need to refresh because they just are that level above. Cool. Next up, we have Liverpool, and I would like to give them an A because they have thoroughly entertained me for this season. However, in reality, I think given the points tally that they have, I would still say C. A lower end C, but still say C. I can't tell you a single performance that really has stood out to me this season. And given the investment, given everything around it, and funny enough, I think given the way that Slot has started to talk as well, has risen a lot of concern for me. And so, yeah, John, what do you have for them?
I'd be tempted to go even lower, maybe even a D. Based on the fact that this is a team who now fully have the fingerprints of Arne Slot all over them. There's no vestiges of Jurgen Klopp still on that team. This is the team that he started to build in his own image. They spent an incredible amount of money on players, and the impression that we're getting from the result is that this is just an incoherent team. That aren't able to do the things that he wants them to do, and have rightly dropped. I mean, you could make an argument that they won the first 5 games of the season, and they didn't look like they deserved to win a lot of those games. Yeah. It finally caught up with them, and yeah, they had like that brief respite of the Villa game and the Real Madrid game, but this is a team who is very gettable at. Teams at the bottom of the table know what to do to cause them problems. And we've not seen any indication, except for Villa. But that Villa game was just insane. That you'd had Arne Slot every week for a month, being like, "This is how you beat us." And Unai Emery was like, "Nah, you know what? I'm going to try.
It's fine.
I'm going to try the opposite."
Yeah,
okay. Yeah. So yeah, I think it's a disaster season for them. I mean, this is already turning into a worse season for them than City had last season. And City had an aged out squad who were trying to play football, where the meta had slowly like tweaked away from them.
Yeah,
it's the complete opposite of the context for Liverpool, where they've got a new manager, they've got a squad which was still within its cycle, and they added a load of exciting players to it, some of the best players in the world. I find it hard to give them higher than a D, because I think there's almost nothing good to say about their season so far.
Yeah, Brandon, are you going to give us the first F of the day?
Oh, I was so close, but I really don't want to.
You chickened out because we've not gone for it, right? That's
yeah. I really thought one of you were going to go
you
for
would
it.
have jumped in if I'd have gone for it. You'd have been like, yeah, that's fine. Yeah.
Immediately F first. You should let me go first. This would have been the first F. Can I give an E? I mean, like probably E for experimenting. I guess that's what I'll give them, because it feels like a giant experiment for the entire season. Like I feel like this is the way they've acted in the and John, I don't know if you feel this way, but I feel like Liverpool this season have acted very un-Liverpool like, and I feel like even in the transfer market, it's not Liverpool like in their approach to how they play in the game. It's not Liverpool like, or what we are accustomed to seeing. And I feel like a lot of what Slot is saying as well doesn't feel like a Liverpool manager as well. Like it feels almost like we struggle to understand them sometimes, and we are just fans. So I can only imagine what other people must be thinking about when he says a lot of things about, oh well, they didn't play like we expected them to play. Like, wow, I guess what did you really think they were gonna just roll over and let you have the win? So yeah, E. I think I'll give it an E. That'll be the lowest so far, and it's so undeserved, man. Like the first 5 games of the season, so undeserved. I don't have any better way to say it.
You all know that there's obviously the running joke that Real Madrid published their lineup 2 days beforehand. I guess Arnie Slot won.
Oh, that's why Slot won.
That's why he beat Real. But I have one question just to ask you, John. But before that, I obviously share every sentiment that you all say, and I think one of the really concerning things is it felt like they did step away from what they usually do, and it went the complete opposite direction. Like we always hear Liverpool fans talk about that they need investment, that they want to spend more, that they want to do more, and it felt like they jumped out their skin, and not a single one of them has really lived up to it, right? And my big questions about this squad is like, I really would like to know who was really responsible for assembling it, because it does feel like not necessarily that the players are bad, but how they gel with one another doesn't really work. Like how he's using Kirkes compared to how we saw Kirkes used before. Then we're seeing that Wirtz only really play. I mean, this is something Brandon said a few weeks ago, right? But Wirtz only really looks good when he plays with somebody like Isak. But Ekitike was the one in form. So how does he play with him? What does bringing in 280+ million strikers do for your squad harmony as well? And it feels FIFA career mode. It feels like you feel like you can just stick in the really expensive, high-rated players and they should work out, but that hasn't been it. But the real question I want to ask you, John, is would you still have them in the title race? Because I kind of went big on our last part and I said no, they're not in it. I cannot see a world that they are still in it. But do you think they are still in the title race?
I think I mentioned already that the season they're having is ending up turning into something worse than what City had last season. I'm an unrepentant Pep Guardiola fan. I don't think that he's perfect in every way, but I think one of the real qualities he has is that guy's a winner, and he won't allow his team to sort of rest on whatever's happening. Last season, I think most managers would have been in his situation and would have just given up and been like, okay, well, we're going to write off this season. We're just going to let the season run its course. We're not going to go down, blah, blah, blah. We'll just get it out of the way and then we can refresh in the summer. What he did was he took that squad. They did spend money in the summer, but they didn't really use the players they brought in. A lot of them were quite young. And he took those pieces of players who were aging out and weren't able to cover the spaces that he would want it to, and he developed a tactical system that worked for it, and they managed to get third place in the end. And they after the 1st of January, they had the best points total from anyone in the Premier League, right? That for me is a sign of what a great coach can do with the pieces that he has. And I know people will say, well, he's had money to spend, he has some of the best players in the world, but we saw what happened in that November last season. City they looked awful. They couldn't win a game. They were losing everything. They dropped a 3-0 lead against Feyenoord. Some of those performances were absolutely abject, and he turned them around, and they limped over the line. They weren't ever great at any point, I don't think, last season, but he got enough out of them, and I think that's a sign of a great manager. And the big question for me is, like, are we going to see the same from Arne Slot this time around? Are we going to see him being able to take that squad and patch it together and make it work in some kind of way? Maybe, but I think that they're already lower than I think that City ever ended up being last season. So if you consider City to have been out of the title race by this sort of point last season, I think you have to probably consider Liverpool out of the title race at this point, unless something drastically wrong goes on, especially with, I think, City looking much more dangerous than they have for a while. Arsenal obviously just grinding away and getting results. I think it's a different title race anyway, and then, as a result of that, I'd say probably not. They're probably not in the title race anymore.
Yeah, long may it continue. Next up, we have Manchester City. John, go first now. What rating do you have for them? What grade?
I think I would go A-, maybe B+.
Yeah.
I think what's so impressive about City this season, again, is the Pep Guardiola stuff. But I think he came into the season thinking, okay, now I've got a new squad, refresh. We can try and do the stuff that I've been wanting to do. The standard Guardiola thing. Press high, possess high, dominate games in possession. And it didn't really work in the first few games of the season. We saw some absolutely batshit games from them, like the game against Brighton, where they went for that really aggressive high press, where it almost seemed to me that he was thinking, okay, I've got all these technical players and we want to try and control games without the ball. Let's go for a really aggressive press and see if that will stop some of the transition problems that we had last season. And it worked for most of the game, but then Brighton figured it out and they just got absolutely killed and the game was turned around.
Yeah.
Since then, I think they've developed this much more appropriate out of possession approach for the players that they have. And I think that's been really fun to watch. I think, we've talked about the last few games where they've started using then wingers narrow. We've seen Jeremy Doku just sort of thriving in that system. They're playing a bit more transitionally, and that's absolutely turned on Erling Haaland to just, to the extent that we think that he'll probably get back to this position where he's over a goal a game in the Premier League, which is nuts, absolutely nuts. So I think off the basis of that, they now look much more dangerous than they did. I still have a feeling that they're going to drop points at times this season. I think they'll be a little bit more, what's the Gattuso mean? Sometimes maybe good, sometimes maybe shit. I think that's what they'll be like. Because I think the league now needs to be. I've said it all the way through, tactical diversity, and City have a team that are very much built for one way of playing, but in some games they're going to have to play in other ways, and I'm kind of interested to see how they come through in those. But I think they'll probably end up being the second place team in the league this season, and I just think it's impressive, like to have a wobble last season, to rebuild, to basically. Not reinvent, because I don't think they've reinvented, but I think they've evolved, and to do it in such a short space of time really is a real testament to how good that Pep Guardiola is, and the fact that he can bring in Kolo Touré and bring in Pep Linders and takes on board different perspectives and different views and isn't so wed to his tactical ideas and hasn't been at any point through his career, can constantly reevaluate them and say, this bit isn't working, let's change it. This bit isn't working, let's change it. It's why he's constantly in these title races. It's why his performance in league, particularly in leagues, has been just wildly successful.
Yeah.
Are you nervous? A little bit nervous as an Arsenal fan?
You see, I have PTSD with the team, so but I actually am respectful of what they are doing, but I think that we have more than what it takes to really last this whole season. I mean, people talk about our depth a lot, right? But like the only way depth actually works is if the depth is fit. But I think that we are seeing that we are kind of going through our period with all the depth and getting points. And I don't think we've seen the best of us. And I'm also trying to envision what the best of City can look like from here, and I'm intrigued to see how long this lasts. And I mean, I was gonna let Brandon go next and then bring this back to you, but since it kind of broached the topic already, I have this running joke on the pod now, where every single week I update on how many goals Haaland has to score in order to maintain a certain percentage, right? So I believe that you did a video where you said on average the league winner scores 91 goals in a season, right? And so based on Manchester City's goal scorers thus far this season, he currently encompasses 60%,
60%.
60% of their goals, right? To the point that I think City doing this as a joke now, where they're not letting anybody else score more than one goal. In order for them to hit 91, he has to score 55 goals. So then I should ask, how sustainable do you think that their goal scoring as a group right now is?
Yeah, I think it's an interesting one because on the one hand, yeah, clearly that's not sustainable. And I would be amazed if he gets 55. I mean, maybe I wouldn't actually. I'd be surprised if he. I'd be pleasantly surprised if he got 55 goals. But I think that the reality is that we will see City's players start to chip in with more production, especially given what we've seen in recent weeks. The other thing to say, I think, is that I've made the video where he talked about is this over reliance going to work, but there's a sense in which I think that the reason why he's putting up an incredible amount of goals right now as well is, as I mentioned before, that the system really suits him.
It suits him, yeah.
In previous seasons, it was very much the system is already here. This is the system we play.
Plus Haaland.
Plus you stick Haaland in and you're like, okay, we're going to play against a lot of low blocks. And then we've got the guy who's like a penalty box present striker. And, he's obviously very good in those situations. And you can still feed him in behind when you manage to break through the opposition back line. But what we're seeing now is a team playing a form of football that is really like the perfect form of football for him, right? The ability to find him in behind in these scenarios where he's running dynamically towards the goal. That just really suits him. And so there's an element to which I think, on the one hand, I don't think it's going to be sustainable enough. But on the other hand, it's like, I'm not surprised that he's scoring so many goals right now, given the way that they're playing.
Before Brandon comes in, I just want to say, I would not be surprised if he scores 50 goals. Again, that could be trauma talking a little bit, but I think the question of sustainability more is about who's going to be that next person to step up and start to score.
Yeah.
Because they need somebody else to start to do that. He would score 40 plus goals, but that still wouldn't be enough unless the rest of the group starts to also contribute.
Yeah.
Brandon?
Yeah, John, I've used this analogy before on the pod, but I would like you to hear it as well. I've long said for many years that Pep has been he's been like a carpenter and he's been using a nail gun. And ever since Haaland has come in, this is like the best hammer in the world, where you just have to you hit it once and the nail just goes all the way in. And he's been using this nail gun all his life, and now he has to figure out how to go back to use something as simple as a hammer. And I think, for me, I think they deserve an A, because I know everybody's talking about that it's unsustainable and it's not going to be like that for the entire season. But everything I've seen so far proves to me that it is working. And if you can feed the most lethal striker in the world consistently throughout the entire season, the thought of other players scoring makes me even more terrified. Because if they have other players coming into it and they have this main man up top, like what else? Like how good can they really be? If he's dragging them so much and they've been looking so good. So for me, I think A is fair. Like the way I would describe it is out of three of the things, the two of them are really high and one is a little bit low. But that's enough for me to give them an A, because I can't believe how good they've looked this season.
Yeah, totally agree. I'm not sure if I agree with your analogy or understand it that much, but yeah.
I think one of the underrated aspects for them is they have been a few players that really have stepped back to a level that they weren't hitting before. One of them is Ruben Dias, I think, and he stepped up back to a better level. I think Gavariola stepped up really well. In fact, the whole back line, actually, I think Matheus Nunes and Nico Riley have been really, really impressive, and they have not felt defensively gettable as they used to before. And I think that part of that is because I think Guardiola has shown a willingness to be more compact there. And we'll see how that passes across the season. Cool. From one side of Manchester, we go to the next side. And I think it's an interesting one because we covered off the back of 5 games undefeated for them. That is 11 points out of 15. And they are in a healthy spot. They are above Liverpool, which probably means we really should give Liverpool an F. But where do you have Man United, John?
I think probably again like A-, B+ for them, just off the basis of the fact that last season was really bad for them. I'm not convinced that they're out of the woods at this point, but
me
as you
neither.
say, they've
Mhm.
had this run of games where they've stayed in games, they've won games. They could potentially have hit that famous 5-game winning consecutive wins, but they didn't. But at the same time, you could probably go through those games and argue that they could have lost all 5 of them as well. But I think that's a big step, because like in last season they just weren't competitive in games. At least this season they are competitive. That's come through a form of, I think, evolution, maybe not tactical, but certainly strategic, where they're definitely going more direct. They're leaning into the fact that they've got no European football and are already out, I guess, of the Carabao Cup, so they've reduced their games down by a load.
They were really committed to playing once a week. They were really, really committed to playing once a week.
Let's put it that way. That's maybe a nice way of putting it, because they did lose to Grimsby, I suppose. But at the same time, I think they've just developed, and I've used the word gimmicky to describe them, to describe their football before. Maybe that's a little bit harsh, but what I mean by that is that it's, they know what to do to get results now, and they're doing it. I think that becomes a problem for all Manchester United managers eventually, because they can come in with all of this idealistic belief that they're going to change the club and get them back to the heights. But I think their coaches work out very early on that that's not going to work for them as a long-term strategy, or certainly not as a short-term strategy. And so the temptation for them is to find ways of being a little bit more competitive in the short term. The question I have is, where does that leave Amorim in the future? Will they hit a ceiling very quickly, at which point they can't really get over that plateau towards the top of the table? Or will he be able to start introducing, again, levels to that gimmickry that make it actually a sustainable way of playing in general? So that's sort of where I'm at for them. But I think in terms of this season, you just have to respect the fact that they've found a way of like turning it around in the short term, so that we've still got Amorim here. Is impressive.
Brandon?
Yeah, I think I want to give it a B as well, because I think they've done well pre-AFCON, and I feel like this would have been a lot lower if they weren't doing so well and they were going into AFCON. I think I would have viewed it a little differently. But I think I agree with John, despite what I've been saying about Amorim for like 18 months now. But I think B is fair, and I think it stems from a lot of the players. I think Mbeumo has been fantastic since he's arrived. I think there are a lot of big performances from players like De Ligt for the season. Harry Maguire has been pretty good. Euro has been good when he's come on. They finally have a decent goalkeeper, so that will make them a lot better going forward. So I think B is fair. I don't want to be harsh on United, but I don't think there's reason to be harsh on them, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean, I have B as well, but it's more lower B, high C, and the reason is that I'm aware that the results recently have been good, but every single game that midfield scares me if that was my team, because I think that they become a sieve really, really fast, and I get why that he feels like he has no other choice but to play Bruno and Casemiro together, but there's just the deficiencies that pairing provides you. And I think like it's not that he has to be Glasner, but I think that when it is that you compare the way that their 3-4-2-1 works compared to Glasner 3-4-2-1, you see a difference in defensive solidarity and respect for that side of the game. And I don't think that has come true as yet. Now, I do think that they have gotten way better attackers to help them make the most of chances in games, and we are seeing that with Mbeumo being one of the signings of the season so far. But I think as the season progresses, I kind of was hoping going into this season that he would have addressed how the midfield would have been differently, and I'm just not going to see that changing at any point, at least until January. And I think that would more than once pop up as a problem for them. So, and so next up we have Newcastle. Again, we can try and speed these through, but Newcastle obviously aren't having that good of a time, and so I'm well aware how turbulent that they have been going into the season and stuff like that. But I still think at one point it felt like it was heading upwards, and it hasn't panned out the way that it probably should have. And so with that, I'm gonna go lower and C. I won't go D as yet, but it's very much varying over D, especially with the recent results that they had against Brentford and West Ham. So John, what do you have?
I'd probably even go D potentially. I've watched a few of their games, and it seems like they're playing low block and counter, and they've forgotten to do the counterpart, right? Which is worrying. It means they've got pretty decent underlying numbers defensively, but I don't read too much into that because they've been so unimaginative in possession of the ball that you
Yeah.
kind of think, well, yeah, of course you've got good defensive underlyings because that's all you've really been doing. I think there's lots of reasons for why Newcastle are where they are. They've obviously struggled in the market. They ended up losing their star striker, and they've replaced him with a guy who I think will be good, but I don't think he's the sort of role that they needed for that position. And they've, a lot of the things that they rely on in their games, they just don't have anymore. So I think they've not been able to rely on Kieran Trippier from the fullback zone, and I think he's a big part of their creative process. And then the other thing I guess that we should talk about is like the intensity. They play a very intense form of football, and it feels this season they've not been able to bring that intensity in away games. They have a really poor away record, and if you watch those games in their mid block, they're just very, very passive, and teams are just finding ways of playing through them and causing trouble. I think the fact that West Ham just comfortably beat them at the London Stadium was pretty worrying. And so, lots of issues for Newcastle, and they'll be fine. I just don't think they'll sort them out this season necessarily.
Just real quickly, have you been surprised by how unimpactful, I should say, Ilanga has been for them? Given it felt like a good match in styles, but it hasn't worked out for them.
Yeah, it's a funny one, isn't it? Again, I think Anthony Gordon hasn't had a great season either, and I think a big part of that is because they play a very direct form of football where it is based around winning the ball back in deeper areas and then expanding into space. And those wide players have generally had a target man in Isak to be able to aim at. And I think this time around it's the opposite, where I think Baltamada sits a little bit deeper and likes to do the sort of nice technical sort of build up before the transition attack. But as a result, he's not getting into those areas to help finish moves off that he's starting out. And as a result, I think those two players are expected to sort of do out to win runs with the ball being played to them in space, which is very different from what they've been doing before. And for whatever reason, it hasn't really played out for either of them. So I think that, I think that this system would look a lot better with a bit more of a stretch striker in place who's going to look to get into the box ahead of those players and finish off moves. And until that happens, they're probably going to look a little bit flaky going forward.
Yeah, Brandon?
Yeah, I don't have anything to add. I agree with John. I think D is what I would have gone with. I think they've been very underwhelming. I just want to know, John, like how much do you think this is down to how? Like, do you think it's a play issue? Do you think it's something that he's not getting through to them in the system or the way they want to play?
Yeah, it's a tricky one to think through. I suspect. I mean, I don't know. I think that they've been very consistent playing under him, right? And again, they're another one of these teams where they've had that oscillation that I talked about before, which is they sort of rotate backwards and forwards depending on whether or not they have Champions League football or not. Whether or not what's happened now is they've just sort of reached the end of a cycle with a squad, whereby because they play such intense football, they just started burning out at the end of that cycle. I don't know, but equally, I do feel as though his tactical system is very, I don't say rigid, but like it's sort of known, and I wonder whether or not he just doesn't have the pieces in place to actually achieve the stuff that we know he can do and is good at. And maybe a big part of it as well comes down to PSR, right? Where there's almost no end in sight for a team like that, where you either you either perform well with the players that you have and then lose them all and then can't use the money to replace them, or you play poorly for a season and you don't lose all your players, but then the issue is that your players aren't desirable, which is why you move them on. So it's a bit of a vicious circle, I think, for clubs like Villa and Newcastle in that respect.
Yeah, cool. Next up, we have Nottingham Forest, and nothing much to say. I mean, they probably might be my first F, given that they still had a lot of investment. They decided to cycle through 3 managers already for the season, and I don't think it could have gone any worse than it has already gone for them. Now, the only saving grace, I'll go D, and just because I love Sean Dyche, I'm a huge fan. It probably makes no sense to you, John, but I absolutely love Sean Dyche. I think he's a staple in the Premier League, and I think he always needs to be in the Premier League. And so I do think that he should just manage to keep them up, but I think it's been a really, really horrendous season for them so far. So yeah.
I love Sean Dyche as well. So yeah, you don't need to apologise, and I think they'll stay up comfortably. I think he's exactly what they need to stay up. Again, the question is whether or not, you know, in the long run he is what they wanted, because it felt as though they were trying to go through a style shift, right? But I think I'm happy to go with D like you, because I think they've now got Dyche, the big D himself. So I think that they are now in a trajectory upwards, and I think they'll be fine in the long run.
If it was that they still had Ange though, I would have said F, because I would have seen no way for it to go upwards with him and that squad.
That's your Arsenal bias coming through, though, isn't it?
I would like to give Forest 2 grades. Like, I mean, pre Sean Dyche should be a F, and like post Sean Dyche, it's like it's a solid B. Like, I think they've been pretty good since he's come in. Like, even outside of the Premier League, I think they've been very good since he's come in. So yeah, I'll give them 2 grades.
One of the most mind-blowing thing for me is how it didn't work out for him at Everton. And like it felt like it was actually a good match, and for whatever reason, it didn't work out. Cool. Next up, we have my boy Granit Xhaka led Sunderland. And despite they taking points off us at the weekend, going absolutely love what they are doing here. They probably would have the highest grade possible if we could have go higher than an A. Given what they're doing and really leading the line in terms of these promoted teams over performing what is respective to do. So yeah, A for me. Brandon?
A+, bro. A+. Everything about them I love. The defense, they play with a lot of heart, they play with a lot of passion. Granit Xhaka playing 1 game a week. Like, you have a player like that who's able to get the best out of himself every single week. You can't get better than that. I think they've played the right way since they've come in, I think. And I didn't know a lot about their manager coming into the season, I'll be very honest. But he's impressed me a lot. Like, even there was one time he made a mistake in the United game and he tried to correct it mid-game. And I see a lot of good from him and the way that they've been playing. And I don't have anything better to say. I've been so pleasantly surprised at how good they have.
And big up the goalkeeper though. He is a ball.
Yeah, where did they find this guy?
He is so good. He's so good.
He's so good.
John?
Yeah, echo everything. A+ for me. Granit Xhaka, a god. Arsenal fans didn't deserve him. I remember. I'm old enough to remember you guys booing him.
I agree. John, did we have the pod yet? I'm not sure if we had the pod yet, but I can promise you, I was one of them that was saying, you know what? He wasn't in the wrong, and I stood with Granit Xhaka at the time. And
history has vindicated you for that, right? What a career.
However, it is absolutely hilarious to hear English commentators talk about him now and how they glaze him as compared to what I had to suffer hearing him and be berated. But
I mean, he used to get just a straight up yellow card just for being Granit Xhaka every game.
Yeah,
right? It's like referees are like, here we go, here's the Granit Xhaka yellow card, and then maybe they upgraded it to a red every once in a while, but it was. Yeah,
it was a running joke on the pod that whenever we talked about a bad tackle, Brandon would ask me, but John, you know what to say? But what if it was Granit Xhaka? And then we're not going to this whole thing again. Cool. Yeah. One Arsenal related thing to Arsenal's rivals, we have Tottenham Hotspur, who, despite their high position in the table, I don't think much people have been really impressed by them. Most notably you, John. And so why don't you tell me what it is that you have for Tottenham and Thomas Frank?
Yeah, probably B-. Probably would have been a C if they hadn't have got like the points on the board that they've got. Yeah. The performances I don't think are really matching the numbers, and I don't know. I've been critical of them, but I think that there's a very there's a very particular sleight of hand that like Spurs fans like to do. Based around their coaches, which is to blame whenever they sort of aren't performing well. They're like, well, what could we possibly do with this squad, right? Let's see how could we possibly perform against the might of your Man Cities and your Liverpools? And I don't know. I looked at their starting 11 at the weekend, and the average cost of their players on there. And again, this isn't indicative of anything, because you can do whatever with like the values, but the average price of each of the players in the starting 11 was 40 million, which is it's in today's market is not a lot, but it's still a chunk of money that has been spent. And regardless of whether or not you think those players are worth that, this is definitely a squad that's had a lot of money spent on it. And I think that when you look at the value that they've spent on the squad and compare it with the underlying numbers, where they're putting up just above relegation level numbers, I don't think that represents a return on investment for them. So for me, yeah, I'm quite critical. I think that people say of coaches like Thomas Frank that they're good defensively because they're conservative, and as a result, it's like we were saying before with Eddie Howe. It's like, yeah, okay, you put up good defensive numbers because you're not actually doing anything other than trying to defend. Like, it's not that impressive to defend well when you're mainly doing defensive stuff. But with Spurs, the defensive numbers aren't even that good. And I did a video for our show the other week where I sort of broke down different phases of play and tried to show that there's big weaknesses in the way that they're approaching that. So I've been very critical. I think there's a lot of headroom for them to improve and do better. And maybe I should have emphasized that more in my criticism of them. But right now, what we're seeing is a team who are, they're bailing themselves out of games with performances by individuals, notably Mohamed Kudus. And I just don't think in the long run that's going to get them where they need to be, and there's no signs that they're working on improving the areas where they're struggling. And so, yeah, for me, probably B-, potentially C+.
Yeah, I think I'm more in C+ territory as well. Just everything that you said. I think that we sometimes see when these coaches make the step up to a club where they are asked to be the protagonists, that they don't always have the answers of how to do that. And I think that when I watched both the Spurs Chelsea game and the Spurs United game, I was really taken aback at how bad they were. Now in one of those games, I think Chelsea were very, very good with how front-footed their press was. I can't say the same about the United game. And especially given that they have recent history of United, you would think that they could, take the ball, try and be front-footed with their approach. It wasn't there, even more so with Kudus not being there. And so, yeah, Brandon?
Yeah, outside of Kudus, I think the majority of good Spurs performances have come from defensive players, whether it be through the way that they defend or they get in on the score sheet or providing an assist or something. I've said before, John, this is on the pod that I've said that I think this is Spurs are a good example of how defense can win you points throughout the entire season. I think that they've probably exhausted that now. So now they have to look for their attacking, and for that reason, I'll give them a C, because I don't see anything positive in the attacking sense for Spurs. And as John said, it could be the conservative style that makes them look better defensively. But from an attacking point of view, I'd probably give them an F, to be honest.
Yeah.
I don't like it outside of Kudus.
Cool. The last two teams here, they are no friends to anybody here. So we have West Ham, and truth is, if we did this 2 weeks ago, they probably would have got an F, but probably they'll now get a D, given they've had some positive results. But the squad is definitely way better than what they are producing, and that is the fact that they are in a relegation scrap is not the kind of thing that you should see players like Jared Bowen being in. And so, yeah, Brandon?
Yeah, West Ham again, very disappointing. And John, you and I know how people rated them so highly last season, and to see where they are right now, I don't really. I'm very worried for West Ham. I mean, they do have a lot of players who are trying to keep them up. I mean, like Souček has been having a good season, relative to how they have been. But yeah, I don't have anything positive to say, man. I mean, like probably a D, I guess, because they look like they're going up. They're going up now, but I don't have much positive to say. Like you said, Bowen shouldn't be in this type of situation.
Yeah. John?
Yeah, D's fine with me, I think. Again, I think they probably will be fine with Nuno there. It's the sort of coach who has the experience to get them just playing like all of the basic stuff well, and with that squad, you think you do that, and they're probably not. I mean, they're not out of touch at all, right? They won at the weekend, so I think they're going to be right up there. And get out of the relegation zone. So D.
Hey, listen, right? Candidly, I hope they don't figure it out, because I want as much as these promoted teams to stay up. So if they had a video want to go, then so be it. And then the last one as well, unfortunately, they are to me the prime example of a team that thought that just because they've existed in the league so long, they didn't need to reinvest again. And we saw them lose their 2 best players in summer and not be replaced adequately. And it's the reason why they're sitting where they are at the bottom end of the table.
And they've sacked their manager.
So you see, like, it feels harsh to say F, right? Because, like, what is the expectation for this season? And mine was to be relegated, and they are there. But I still think even with that connotation, it's still been bad, even worse than I expected it to be. So I'm gonna go D. John?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to argue otherwise. I think arguably they've been a little bit unlucky. I don't think they've been, how it's 2 points they have. I don't think they've been that bad, but
Yeah, they aren't that bad.
equally, yeah. What kind of mark are they expecting when they're bottom of the table? And at this point, you just feel they're adrift and they're not going to get back into it. So yeah, would you say D? I can go with D. E. I can go with E.
Brandon?
Well, the only two W's they've seen for the season are in Wolverhampton Wanderers when they're walking into the stadium. So that's all they've been seeing, unfortunately. Yeah, I'm good with that D because I guess everybody had them around the relegation scrap. So I guess that'll be very fair. Yeah.
All right, guys. So, John, I know we've kept you way beyond the allotted time, but if you still have time, we have some quick fire questions to do with you really fast. Yeah. All right.
Yeah.
Cool. So, me and Brandon will go 1 in 1 out of this, right? So, short answers. First thing that comes to your mind: all-time favorite footballer. Who's the one footballer that's always been your favorite?
I mean, there's so many potentials. I suppose I'll give you a Leeds one and a non-Leeds one. My Leeds favorite of all time is Tony Yeboah. I think he was like, that was the time I really got into supporting. I was old enough to really know what I was doing, and he just had a couple. I mean, he was there for a season, but he joined in one January and left in the next, and he was just a super exciting player, and in many respects, quite a modern player. So he's my Leeds one, and then maybe a rogue shout for non-league is Moussa Dembele, the Spurs player, Fulham player. I don't know. He just did it for me at a point in time when I think players like that just weren't really valued as much. And I don't know. I played in a very similar position role to him, and I sort of always been like a neat and tidy midfielder, and I always think those players don't get the recognition they deserve. So he's probably my all-time favorite non-Leeds player.
Nice, Brandon.
Yeah. So John, we know that you have a great affinity for Bournemouth, but outside of them, what team have you enjoyed analyzing over the past 3 years in the Premier League?
Oh, in the Premier League.
Yeah.
Ooh. I mean, my friends will say that like I don't enjoy any teams. And they say this thing that they're like, oh, why do people not just realize that he doesn't just hate your club, he just hates all clubs? So in terms of like the fun teams to analyze, I think Arsenal have been super fun. I'm not just saying that because John's here, but I think the evolution of Mikel Arteta has been like genuinely interesting, and I think he has evolved past Pep Guardiola in a particular direction. I don't know if it's the direction I think that will eventually end up being the way that everyone else goes, but I think it's genuinely new and innovative and interesting. Obviously, like Guardiola at the moment is super fun. Like the way that City are evolving is good fun. But I guess these teams are kind of boring to say. If I'm not allowed to say Bournemouth, I'm just having a look up and down the table. Like who am I going for? I don't know. I guess that finally I would maybe say Crystal Palace in terms of the fact that like I quite enjoy that what they're doing with the mid-block out of possession stuff, because I think it's genuine. It's not like a new approach to the problems that a lot of the elite sides are facing, but I think they found a solution to a lot of the modern problems that football clubs face, but doing it from a bottom half of the table with those resources and doing it in a way that is actually sustainable. So I think I'll probably say them too, because it's much easier to analyze and have fun with the teams that have all the fun players. It's much harder to do that with the teams that that don't have that.
Yeah. On that same note, about managers, who's one manager you've always admired?
Marcelo Bielsa. Marcelo Bielsa, absolutely. He was the coach who really got me into giving a shit about tactics. He obviously coached my team Leeds, and that was sort of my entry. That's my gateway level drug to doing the sort of stuff that I do now. Yeah, I'll always love him. He has massive flaws, but he also is just the greatest guy ever. So I'll let him off.
So John, what is a recent footballing moment that made you sit back in your chair and go, wow? Just as a fan, not as an analyst or what you do for a living, but just as a fan, what made you go, wow?
Well, there was a game I was watching. Oh, I mean, I think it was probably at the weekend. The Jeremy Doku goal was just. I'm a guy who sits in his chair and like doesn't always have the commentary on and sort of has his arms folded and has a grumpy face. But then when that one happened, my flatmate plays. He at the moment he's playing Ark Raiders, and we have two TVs in the middle of the room, faced like back to back, and he plays on one side and I sit watching football on the other, and he sort of responds to what's going on in the game based on how I react. And that when that Doku goal went in, I went, ooh. And he's like, "What on earth has happened?" He came around to watch because I don't usually respond in that way. So that's just a recent one where I was like, I've still proven that I have that like vestigial fan within me still. So
very nice. Next one. What has been your favorite development from the season so far? And like on the flip side, what is the development that has driven you mad?
Do you mean from a tactical point of view?
It doesn't have to be, but if it is, you want to lean into that.
Let's say the development that's driven me mad is set pieces. Just to remind you. That's not necessarily the right answer. But like, and like I've said in the I did a long podcast on the Pot Shot Pod. Where I talked about set pieces. I
listened to that too.
And that was the one where I've been able to set out my thinking in like the clearest terms, I think. But as I tried to make clear in that, it's like the worry for me isn't that Arsenal are really good at set pieces. I think that's fine. I think it's good. I think it's remarkable what they do. One of my best friends is a set piece coach at a Premier League side, and I get really excited about like when they do well from set pieces. So it's definitely not I hate set pieces. I guess the worry for me is that if that incentivizes teams to lean into that to the expense of some of the other aspects of the game, that's where I start getting a little bit nervous and raise the question, do we think that they may be a bit OP? So yeah, that's just a tongue-in-cheek one. I don't really worry too much about that at all. But yeah, developments, I'm trying to think.
Before you answer, could I just say one thing in response to what you just said? So like, so it's no secret that we're admirers of your content, right? And so like, I've digested everything that you said about this, and like, I'm well aware that there are football fans that find it very hard to separate when you are hearing somebody just saying what they feel about something and to be able to dissociate it from this is an attack on your team, right? And I personally, I haven't taken it like that because like I share that concern of over-reliance on a part of the game that, yes, there is moments that it can excite you, right? But there is not the type of football we want to see all the time, right? And so what I was thinking about that could be the response to this then is that like you get set pieces from lane teams and us in territory. And so like what I have been hoping that, football is cyclical and stuff like that the next cycle of this is teams actually decide to try and press a lot more then, because then you want to avoid teams entering those territories to win those set pieces. And so we start to see teams try to press higher, and that could be the next flip that comes from this, right? But unfortunately, to get to our flip in a tactical evolution, we have to go through this. And so we have to go through a weekend like this weekend where I think at one point out of the 9 goals scored, it was 6 was set pieces of the 9 for the weekend. And
I think that's a really fair comment. And as I said, I think in the Pot Shot Pod, this was just me. This was just a gut response to me to like watching the Spurs game against Everton, where I thought they just didn't deserve to be comfortable in that game, and they were right. So that was just my gut response. And a lot of these things, it's just me thinking out loud and not really, taking the thoughts to their final conclusions, which is why it was nice to be able to do that podcast to actually set out some of my concerns a little bit more. But I think you're right. Like, I have no problem whatsoever with Arsenal excelling at set pieces. It's remarkable what they do. They have the players to be able to do it. Incredible ball strikers in Saka and Rice, a cheat code in Gabriel. That should be celebrated. That is a good thing. Like you say, the response to that shouldn't be, well, let's change the conditions of the game necessarily. It should be other teams should get better at stopping that from happening, either at source or in those set piece moments. But I guess my point was more just saying, if we end up with a point where all of the teams are just leaning into this and we see a real drop off in terms of what's happening in open play, that would be a concern. That would be a concern for me, and I would want to see at least the purveyors of the game actually finding ways of stopping it. So, that really was just a tongue-in-cheek answer. But yeah, I don't know. Like, I in many respects, I see myself as sort of quite neutral about the game in that sense. It's kind of, I see my job as being an analyst, and it's kind of like, this is what the conditions are, and you work within those conditions. Not the biggest not the biggest fan of VAR, but I'm also not the biggest not fan of VAR. I think a lot of the problems we have with VAR were things that I talked about before we brought it in and said this could be an issue with it. But at the same time, I'm not going to sit here being like, oh, see, I was right, they've ruined the game, etc. But yeah, I think that for me, it's a sort of simple thing. I want to see good football being played. I want to see good open play football being played because, Arsenal fans were saying to me, set pieces are part of the game. Set pieces are part of the game. And I'm like, yeah, absolutely. Set pieces are a part of the game. But the game itself is the open play bit. And I want to see teams doing fun things in that. I want to, and it doesn't even need to be fun. I want to see teams being smart and being like, okay, you're generating goals like this against us, so we're going to defend in this way, or you're defending in this way. And so I want to see coaches looking at that and being like, here's the weaknesses, this is where we pull them apart. And that the big worry for me is that when teams stop doing that and just lean into almost like cheat code stuff, that's when I'm like, the game is worse off for it. So
yeah,
that's a really cop-out answer, but I'm sorry.
No, that's really good. So is there any positive developments that you have enjoyed? Anything that you have enjoyed from the game so far?
Yeah, I mean, I think the Premier League has never been more fun from a tactical point of view. I think
I agree.
There's a lot of people. There's a lot of people out there who want to tell this narrative that the game has been ruined because the game has been optimized, and I understand why people miss the old football where it was like individually focused. You get these like mercurial talents who could just beat teams by solving problems themselves, and I understand why people miss that. I do think that we still have that around. I think that the conditions are just so much harder, so we don't see those things happening as much. And I see that as a celebration of the individualism, right? Like the ability of team players in the past to just sort of dribble everyone and score a goal. That was fantastic. The ability of players now to stop opponents from doing that is also an individual talent. And we see the physicality that we have in the Premier League now. In many respects, it does feel quite miserable, but at the same time, that is still a skill that individuals have. They use those individual skills to problem solve and stop opponents from doing things. That's the reality of the world we live in. And that if that makes the game more tactical than individual, then I guess so be it. But at the same time, like, I think that there's nothing more exciting than watching teams come together and sort of problem solving as groups and trying to say, this is where this team's weaknesses are. I mean, the idea of like coaching a team who had to come up against Arsenal and being like, this is the best team defensively that's probably ever existed. How do we find ways of causing them problems? I see that as like a really fun problem to solve. And the same for the teams who are generating loads of chances in their attacking play. Is like, how do we stop this from being an issue? I think those are the things I find super invigorating as an analyst, and I think that I just don't think we've ever been at a more exciting point in time than we are right now, because the dominant meta has collapsed a little bit, and teams are finding ways of triggering opponents' presses to make spaces and find those spaces and access them. And it's like, I don't think the game has ever been more interesting from a intellectual point of view than it is right now. So I'm pretty positive about where football is at.
That is the first time you said meta on the pod, so well done. We've only taken
actually, I slipped one in earlier, but I got away with it. But yeah, that was the second time technically. So
Brandon.
Okay, so you, Jon Mackenzie, have been given total autonomy to change one rule in football. What would it be?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think, I don't know, the one rule that really annoys me is the one where you can shield the ball out of play when you haven't even touched it, and it counts as not a foul, right? So the ball is going out, you're a defender, the striker is running through, and you can just block the striker without ever having touched the ball and got it under control. I would make that illegal. I'd make that a free kick. I'd say you can't shield the ball unless you've already taken a touch, at which point it becomes useless.
Yeah. True.
Hands up.
I like that one, though. That's interesting.
Hands up. I am well aware that Gabriel does that probably more than anybody else.
But I think that it would make defending a lot more like open and
it would.
Yeah.
Okay, so this one is a kind of tricky one for you, right? So
this is a tricky one. The others have all been tricky. I'm worried about
on this pod, we have 9 members on this pod, right? Okay. And so I'm gonna
ask me to name them all.
No.
No, it's much easier than that.
I'm gonna give you their first names, and you're gonna tell me the best footballer you can think of with that name.
Oh no, nice.
Okay, so we can start with me, right? So mine is John. So best footballer you can take with your name.
John? John. John Collins.
I'll take that.
Fair enough.
I quite like John
Fair enough.
Collins.
There must be
I
better.
think he's going to go
But
John
to be
Barnes
fair-
or something.
But to be
Barnes,
fair,
yeah.
it doesn't have to be best. We can go with the first footballer that comes to your mind.
Yeah. Okay.
Next up, we have Brandon. So
Brandon Williams, I guess, is the only one I can think of.
I knew he would say that.
Is there
said
any
he was
other
gonna say
Brandon?
that.
I don't think there is. I think he's the only one.
I nearly said
I
Brendan
know.
Aronson, but that's Brendan, not Brandon.
Yeah, he's
Yeah,
Brendan.
that is
Yeah.
Brendan.
Yeah.
Next one, we have Daniel.
Daniel. I mean, all I can think of is Daniel Farker, but there must be a footballer out there with the name Daniel. Daniel Sturridge, is he?
Oh, that's good.
Yeah.
That's really good.
Yeah.
actually,
The first person that came to my mind actually was Aga or Aja. How you
Yeah,
it?
Dan Aga. Yeah.
Oh yeah, Aga.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Next one we have. Okay, so this is at the point where I'm not sure if you'll know players with these names, but we'll see how it goes. Next one we have is Yuan.
What?
Yuan. EUAN. Yeah.
There was a player called Ewan. Ewan. I don't know. The person that I've got in my head is Ewan Thomas, who is a 400-meter sprinter. I think. Ewan. There must be. Is there a Jamaican player called Ewan? I've got in my head like maybe in the 90s.
I do know the name is like Irish in origin, that kind of thing. So
Yeah.
I
know
have no idea.
Leeds have a player called Yunnan O'Kane, but that's Yunnan, not Yuan.
That's close though.
We'll take it. Yeah, we'll take it.
He's so unique. We just don't know anybody with that name except him.
I don't know anybody else with that name. Next one we have is Shivanand.
Nah, he ain't getting that.
Yeah,
come on.
What's the closest name you can think with that?
How about
The closest name I can think of is Shrivnarine Chanderpaul.
That's
not
we'll
a
take that.
footballer.
We'll take it.
We'll take it. Next one we have.
There's an easy one coming up actually. Okay.
Yeah. We are Aidan.
Aidan McGeady was.
There we go. Nice,
yeah. Next one we have is Virgil.
Oh.
Yeah,
I mean, we only know one, right? Virgil van Dijk.
Correct.
Next one is Sean.
Sean Gota.
Big one. That's a big one.
And then the last one is Dekeel.
Nah, he's not getting that.
Dekeel. Yeah.
Nah. I'm thinking of someone, but I think it might be the surname. No.
If you come close, we don't take Daniil. If you found anybody with Daniil, I guess.
Yeah, I don't know.
That's okay, Brandon.
This is the last question, John. Actually, so we're not going to keep it much longer after this. What are your thoughts on the discourse about the England World Cup team going into the World Cup? Like, what are your thoughts on some of the things that they've been said from Tuchel, from the English media, from the players themselves? What do you think about it all?
So I'm not an international football fan, and I don't follow England. I follow Scotland. So as a neutral, I think that England should go in easily amongst the favourites, and the fact they've not won anything for ages is a real detriment to their name. So I think that if they don't win it this time round, I mean, again, look, it's a tournament, right? So it's random. I'm not saying that if they don't win it, it's an indictment on them, but like, I'll be surprised if they don't go deep and cause their opponents a lot of trouble.
Yeah. Do you think Danny Welbeck has a good chance of going? Because I think he does.
That's an interesting question.
Which is crazy, but yeah.
Yeah, I mean, he's had like an incredible remontada really recently. I always like to see players who you don't expect to do well doing well, especially older players, especially the older I get. You know, when your body starts falling apart. I turned 40 recently, and it's just miserable. I played football 2 days in a row this week and then got a migraine afterwards because my body couldn't take the stress. So make the most of having young bodies and play as much sport as you can, because it very quickly leaves you.
Yeah.
Okay, so and the very last thing is you all play a game on the Tifo Football Podcast, right? So pick a country.
Oh no. You're not going to get me to do Trinidad and Tobago, no. That would be.
Look, he said Trinidad and Tobago.
Yeah, you already said it. So Can you name for me the top 5 Trinidad appearance makers in the Premier League history?
I mean, Dwight York's got to be number one.
He
Mhm.
is number
By a
one with
long way.
375 appearances.
Is Kenwyn Jones Trinidadian?
Yes,
He is. He's
Is he
third
in there?
with 195. You see, you're
Oh.
doing great. You're doing
doing
great.
good.
Yeah, but I'm really scraping the barrel now. I'm very low on names. You need to give me some clues.
So there's one who currently works on a sport network.
Robbie. No, he's Jamaican.
Yeah.
Shaka Hislop.
Yes,
No.
correct.
Shaka Hislop.
Yes, correct.
He's
Nice.
second with 221.
Did he play for Trinidad?
Yeah.
Yeah, he played for us in the World Cup in 2006.
Yeah.
Oh, nice,
Yeah.
cool. Oh, there we go. Got 3 already. So
The next one played for Arsenal. He was invincible actually. Sunderland and Middlesbrough.
he was an invincible.
He did make enough appearances to get
It's not.
medals.
Is it? No, not Traore. No, I don't know.
He has a very English name actually. Justin Hoyt. I don't know if you remember him.
Yes.
And the last one is actually our record all-time goal scorer. And he played for Birmingham, Coventry, and Southampton. But he only scored 10 in the Premier League.
You said Birmingham, the first one.
Yes, he played for Birmingham, Coventry, and Southampton. With 63 appearances. 10 goals and 63
Is this
for
a long
Trinidad.
time? Is this a long time ago?
Yeah, we actually haven't had a Trini since Kenwyn. Well, now there's Rio Cardenas who plays for Crystal Palace. He plays for Trinidad now. But since Kenwyn Jones, we haven't had a regular Trinidadian in the Premier League.
Okay. Oh, I don't know. I was going to say John Salako, but I think he's just.
You're very
close. You're very close. You have one of the names correct.
Stern John.
Yeah, there we go.
Stern John.
Well done. Well done.
Let's
well
go.
done.
He knows ball.
Does that make me an honorary Trinidadian?
Yes. It means that if you ever visit Trinidad, we have to carry you for doubles. So it's on us.
Nice. I'm just gutted I didn't get Justin Hoyt. That's all.
Yeah, bro. I mean, you did really well, though. You did
really well otherwise.
And I would not have thought that Justin Hoyt made so much appearances in the Premier League because it felt like he was kind of fleeting, right? However, guys, that is it. John, thank you so much for your time. It's really been an honor to have you here with us. Hopefully next time we have you, we would not run literally an hour more than we were planning.
You just want me to rate everything. You're going to get me to rate every Trinidadian footballer of all time.
Yeah. It'll probably take about 30 minutes at most.
Yeah, that's true. It'll be a bit quicker.
Yeah.
And with that, guys, we will call it a show there. Thank you again, John, for your appearances here. Hopefully we'll have you again. And with that, guys, we will see you guys next week for wrapping up the Premier League. So catch you guys next time. See you soon. Take it easy later.